Thank you very much for coming, everyone. If you had told us 8 years ago that 9 in 10 young people would believe they could never own a home, that 35-year-olds would be living in their parents' basements, that rent would have gone from, on average, $950 to $2,200, that the average mortgage payment would have gone from $1,400 to $3,200 in just 8 years, that young people would be living in homeless shelters while they go to university. If you had said that we'd have people, 1.5 million people going to food banks, 1 in 5 skipping meals altogether, some people going to the president of a Mississauga food bank and asking for help with medical assistance and dying, not because they're sick, but because life has become so miserable. If you had said that 30,000 people would die of drug overdoses and that the federal government's solution to that would be to decriminalize cocaine, heroin, and other deadly drugs, no one would have believed you. It would have been thought ridiculous to suggest any of those things could ever happen in Canada. Yet 8 years later, after 8 years of Justin Trudeau, everything feels broken. And people feel broken. That's why many are suffering from depression and they're losing hope. Our job is to turn their hurt back into hope, to give them faith that their lives can be better tomorrow than they are today, to treat mental health problems rather than ending people's lives. Yet the government says that in less than a year, it will be providing medical assistance in dying to people whose only condition is depression or mental illness. Experts tell us that depression and mental illness can come and go, that people can be suffering and desperate today, but a few months later, be thankful that they still have their lives and their families. Our role should be to give them that hope, to help them get through the valley and back to the mountaintop. And that is why I'm pleased to support the private member's bill of Member of Parliament Ed Fast that would ensure that medical assistance and dying is not the solution to people suffering with their mental health. We also have here the senator from Saskatchewan, Senator Batters, who's devoted much of her senatorial work to giving hope to people who suffer from depression and to preventing suicide. She's continuing that work by supporting this bill. And so Conservatives will go forward to turn hurt into hope, to give people back control of their lives, to support their mental health, and to overcome addiction so that they can live good, happy, decent lives, as should be the Canadian promise. Thank you very much, and I now turn the floor over to Ed Fast to discuss his bill. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this presser. It is my contention that the government has moved too far and too fast in implementing its MAiD legislation. My bill C-314, which is the Mental Health Protection Act, will reverse and revoke the inclusion of the mentally ill under Canada's MAiD regime. Now, just to be very clear, my bill does not in any way reverse the rest of Canada's MAiD regime. It is focused on protecting the most vulnerable Canadians, namely the mentally ill, who often have no one advocating for their interests. So just a little bit of context. You may recall when Bill C-14 was introduced and debated in 2016, many of us warned that Canada was treading upon a slippery slope that would quickly lead to those not at the end of their lives being included in Canada's MAiD regime, placing Canada's most vulnerable groups at risk. And we were assured that our fears were unfounded. I so remember that debate. We were assured, your fears are unfounded. There's nothing to see here. Don't worry and be happy. We were assured that MAiD would remain an exceptional and extraordinary remedy for those experiencing intolerable and incurable pain at the end of their lives. Sadly, our fears were confirmed with the Truchon case and then the government's Bill C-7, which not only eliminated the foreseeability requirement, but extended MAiD to the mentally ill. I note that the original Bill C-7 did not include mentally ill persons. In fact, the Justice Minister originally went to great lengths to explain why MAiD should not be extended to the mentally ill. It was the Senate that inserted the mental health provisions into C-7, and the government accepted that amendment without protest. So let me be clear. There is no consensus across Canada that medically assisted suicide should be extended to the mentally ill. None. In fact, the government failed to engage in meaningful consultations with experts and mental health stakeholders on a variety of issues, including irremediability, competency, and the issue of suicidality. Neither did the government engage with Canadians broadly in a meaningful national discussion about what this new policy direction means for our country. Its only engagement was to strike an expert panel that was prohibited from examining the actual merits of MAiD being extended to the mentally ill. All it did was tinkered around the edges with safeguards and professional standards, but it didn't address the merits of MAiD being extended to the mentally ill. My bill will simply return the state of our law to what it would have been had the unelected Senate and compliant government not intervened. So those suffering from mental disorders, including depression, as the leader has mentioned, deserve the mental health and social supports and counseling they need to find some joy and some meaning in life. It is deeply concerning that this government appears to be inexorably moving from a culture of life to a culture of death. So my bill seeks to arrest that momentum and give the government and all Canadians time to reconsider the direction the government appears to be taking us when it comes to assisted suicide and euthanasia. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Since 2016, I have been fighting the expansion of assisted suicide to mental illness. As Canadians learn more about the government's plan to do this, they are genuinely shocked and rightfully appalled. My connection to this issue is a personal one. My husband was former MP Dave Batters. Actually, Dave and our leader Pierre Poilievre were first elected together in 2004 and served together until 2008. Dave struggled with severe anxiety and depression and died by suicide in 2009, days shy of his 40th birthday. I witnessed firsthand that for someone who is mentally ill, there can be a tunnel vision that makes that person want to end his or her life, even when there are obvious viable options. I still wonder if there might have been another way out for Dave, another counselor, another medical treatment, another conversation that might have made the difference. Because of the finality of his choice, I will never know. Suicidality is often a symptom of mental illness, and expanding assisted suicide to those with mental illness will deliver to them the lethal means to end their lives. Some Canadians will die before they can access treatment that could relieve their suffering and give them years to live. Even one life lost unnecessarily is too many. Take it from someone who knows. Mental illness is not irremediable. There is always hope for someone to regain their health. That is why assisted suicide should not be extended for mental illness, and it's why my caucus colleague Ed Fast's bill is important. As a compassionate society, we must give those enduring psychological suffering help and hope, not an easier way to die. I have seen the major gaps in our mental health care system, but the answer is not to provide death as a certain and final option. The preservation of hope for people with mental illness is absolutely paramount. They need support, treatment, and our promise that we will never give up on them, even when they can see no other option but to give up on themselves. Thank you.
MAiD, just to go back to the MAiD subject today, I wonder, would a future Poilievre government repeal the mental health extension, presuming it's going to go ahead, and would you consider the use of the notwithstanding clause in order to do so?
Well, to your first question, would we repeal it? Yes, we would repeal it. We don't believe that medical assistance in dying for people whose only condition is mental health trouble. I don't believe we would need to use the notwithstanding clause because no court has required MAiD be provided for mental health alone. So the government is going way beyond anything the Supreme Court or any other court has asked for, and therefore the notwithstanding clause would not be necessary.
Preemptively? Like you don't see
We don't
a role in
need
which
to.
it could be used preemptively?
We wouldn't need to because courts have already ruled on MAiD multiple times and they've never required MAiD for medical illness. So we wouldn't need to use the notwithstanding clause.
I want to ask on the
Thank you.
feasibility
Thank you very
of a
much, everyone.
public
Great.